Welcome into episode 2 of the Uncorked Auburn football season preview. We are officially 60 days away from Auburn football, and today I'm joined by a guy that you see on Village Vice and here on the Auburn Sports Network, and that is Brad Law. Brad, what's up? How are you?
How we doing, Taylor? I'm loving it. 60 days to kick off as we talk right now. When some people watch it, will be under 60. It's a fun time. Feels different being in July.
It does. It does. Vegas currently has Auburn's win total at 7.5. Do you think that Auburn can win 8 games this year? And what do you think needs to happen for this season to be considered successful for Hugh Freeze's, second year leading the program?
Yeah, I do. Now, I'm always bullish. I mean, I went into 2012 and had reasons why we'd probably win 9 or 10 games. I went into 2022 with reasons why Auburn could win 10 games. So, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, I see improvements along the offensive line. I see improvements obviously in the receiving core. I see the overall level of talent being raised on the team. And I see seniors playing important roles. I see a large senior class with seniors starting at a lot of positions on the field. And I think that's a positive thing. And I think that's a reason to think that Auburn should win 8 or more games in 2024. And I think getting to 8 would be important. Like 8 is around the average all time for Auburn. There have been seasons much better than that. There have been seasons not as good, but about 8 is the average. And so I think to come out of this, 3 straight seasons where it's been suboptimal and get back to the average, that's the next step. It's not the final mark. It's not the goal. The goal is championships always. But the next step, would go from 6 to 8, I think, this year.
And then Michael from Birmingham, this kind of relates back to the schedule, back to how many games Auburn can win. But what games on Auburn's schedule this season are you most anxious about? And then which games are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward. Is it too cliche to say the first game that I'm looking forward to?
No, no.
Hey,
you can be excited about. You can be
yeah.
excited about whatever you feel excited about.
I mean, I know what Michael's asking with his question. And so my answer to what he's meaning to ask is Oklahoma, because I think that's a pivotal game. And we've talked about it on Village Vice here the last few episodes. Oklahoma is going to be better, I think, at the end of the year than they will be at the beginning of the year. And coming off the Tennessee game in Norman the week before, there's the potential to be real pressure on Oklahoma. Meanwhile, if Auburn takes care of business in the first 4, like we think it should, with all due respect to Alabama A&M, Cal, New Mexico, and Arkansas, you get a chance to start 5-0 before you go on the road for the first time and get a win over an Oklahoma team that won 10 games last year. So I'm fired up to see that game, that environment for Oklahoma to play its first road game in the SEC.
And this is something, Oklahoma's one that I have a star by as well. And I think this is something that you and Zach have also talked about on Village Vice, but that I feel like has the potential to set the tone for the rest of the season. That's the first, that's the game that everyone's going to have their eyes on for the first little stretch of the season. And I feel like it either has the opportunity to boost the confidence of a lot of the young players that are going to have to play, especially the receivers, and, let them see, hey, I can do this. I can compete with some of the big names in college football, and because they're going to need the confidence going into, the later stretch of first road games and, the Georgia, the Alabama later on in the season. So I feel like that's important. One, because it'll be Oklahoma's first road game in the SEC. And 2, that I feel like that could be a major high or a major low for this team this season. Speaking of lows, I feel like Auburn fans feel like we're in a little bit of a rut right now recruiting. Ever since Alvin Henderson flipped, things have been kind of slow. But something that I find very interesting is the idea of a player silently committing and then, working strategically with the staff to time out the announcement and make sure that, the announcement comes when it's going to be most beneficial to the program. So do you think that, don't press the panic button? We've seen what this staff can do. And do you think that they have some things kind of in a funnel and they're going to wait until, because we still have to July 24th, I believe it is, when this dead period will end. So do you think that that's a little bit of what's going on, is, hey, let's wait till we're in the thick of this and make sure that Auburn's still in the headlines?
Yeah, I do, because it's what they did last year. Big Cat is the big weekend, and that's when you probably see the most movement around it. But this staff, and we saw some comments on some of our Village Vice shows a couple of, the last week or two when we talk recruiting, and people complaining that the staff went on vacation before the dead period started. And they front loaded this summer recruiting period with visits and time and effort and investment and everything that goes into recruiting. And they got some really good results from doing that. And they did it to kind of start they got a little bit of a head start on the dead period and get a little extra time off. These guys go 100 miles an hour and decided to start the dead period a little early. Doesn't mean they had no contact, but I think it probably stands to reason that other schools were giving these recruits more attention. Not that Auburn wasn't giving them any, but that they were giving them more attention over that 1 week period. And so it would stand to reason that there'd be a little bit of movement the opposite direction during that time span. Now we're talking June, we're talking July. Last year around Big Cat, you remember the scene of Perry Thompson throwing Hugh Freeze in the pool, and that was a big deal. And I think more of that's coming. We try not to get way too high or way too low when it comes to recruiting news in the summer. You enjoy the wave of positive news when you get it, but until those guys are signed, it's not final, and other schools are going to keep coming after them. And in the same way, if guys decommit from Auburn or just commit elsewhere, that's a little bit of a lower wave, but you can wait because it's not over yet. And by now this staff is going to continue to recruit guys all the way until they shut down their recruitment, if then. So a lot of belief, a lot of good things when this staff puts the pedal to the metal relative to recruiting again.
And something that I forget about a lot of the time is the fact that this staff, Auburn is a name brand school. People know what Auburn is no matter where you are in the country. But something that'll sell itself when it comes to recruiting is wins. If you can put a good record, if you can put 5 SEC championships in the past 10 years in front of a player, or however many national championships, that speaks for itself. And this coaching staff doesn't really have that, because the few years prior to Hugh Freeze taking over weren't pretty. So that's something that I forget about a lot, is they're having to build from, I don't want to say the ground, but a little above the ground up right now, because they've got to sell something. And right now they can't sell the program on wins. Hopefully this season will help turn that around. And I'm assuming that they're selling on the point of being part of a change, make history and be part of a team that revitalizes the program, brings Auburn back to what we all know it could be, and hope that it will be very soon. What's your opinion on where Auburn stands with him? And at this point in the story, what my concern is, if the coaching staff, backs off, which I know anytime that a player, either flips his commitment or commits somewhere else over, I'll use Auburn, for example, right now, the natural thing for the fan base to do is say, we didn't want him anymore. Auburn stopped recruiting him. But if there was a scenario where the coaching staff decided, hey, we're gonna move a different direction, I'm concerned about the reaction of the fans, because at this point, I think in their eyes, which I'm a fan too, but I'm trying to be realistic, that's going to feel like a loss. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because of all the hype.
Yeah. I don't feel that way, but I know that fans do feel that way. And I think that they feel that way for a month, or 60, 59 days, or actually it'd be less than that. They'd feel that way. Let's say any quarterback any year on July 4th says, I'm shutting down my recruitment and I'm going somewhere other than Auburn. You feel kind of bummed about it until media days. And then the next verbal commitment that you get from somebody else that you really wanted. I think that's the nature of being a fan of recruiting, not a fan of one school or another. But if you follow recruiting, all right, I'm bummed about it for a few days till the next guy commits, and then I'm excited about it. And then media days comes around, and we're starting to talk about the 2024 season. And then practices start, and we get reports from fall camp, and then the first game is here, and and now it's let's roll with the guys that we have that did commit and follow up and signed, and now they're here, and now they've got the orange and blue on, and these are the guys we have. So I don't know. I would say that this staff has been very intentional about what it's done on the recruiting circuit. And when they really commit, when Auburn commits, it has just as many resources all the way down to the community as any other school. So I wouldn't count Auburn out of any recruiting battle until that individual, whoever he may be, says, that's it, I'm going somewhere else and I'm shutting it down.
What do you think has made this coaching staff's recruiting effort so successful thus far?
I think they know how to do it. I think they have experience doing it. I think Hugh Freeze came in knowing how to recruit at a high level in the SEC. He knows what kind of player you need, and he knows how to build relationships with people. That's what a lot of recruiting is, whether it's high school coaches or dads or moms or aunts or uncles or whatever it may be. He knows how to build relationships with people. There's some people, Taylor, you work with some people who, some of them are they're better with people than others. And Hugh Freeze is really good at building relationships with folks. And so he knows, all right, I got to spend this much time. I need to, the end with this guy is this individual. And I'm going to get further with this person by really building a bond with this person in addition to the players. So I think that's part of it. But then the effort, I think at Auburn, you can succeed recruiting. Gene Chizik had success recruiting. Tommy Tuberville had a lot of success recruiting. Gus Malzahn, if you take away offensive linemen, had loads of success in recruiting. Auburn sells itself as well as any other major program in college football. You just got to have somebody driving the thing who knows where to spend the time, who to talk to, kind of what the areas of emphasis need to be. And what I like about this staff is they've identified offensive, defensive line, wide receiver. They've gone about identifying the areas where Auburn needed the most help, and they've gone out and have addressed those in these first couple of recruiting cycles.
Are you high on Payton Thorne heading into this season? Because I think as excited as people are about the additions, that's the one thing that's hanging over heads is, okay, y'all brought in all of these incredibly talented receivers, but who's going to throw them the ball?
Yeah, that's we're going to do a show one day, maybe next week, on SEC quarterbacks. And I'm higher on the offense in 2024 as a whole than I was a season ago. And I think with good reason. And I think that's the conversation, because Payton Thorne could be the number 1 quarterback in the league or the number 16 quarterback in the league. But you're only going to do as well as the other parts around you, and as well as the scheme that you're fitting into. And I think last year you see a huge difference in his individual stats in the first 6 games of the year and then the second half of the year. It's right at that point in the year where Hugh Freeze and company said, the way that we're running this offense and this scheme, it's not enough RPO, and I'm not comfortable with the back and forth, and here's what we're going to be from now on. And there was a really clear identity offensively. Now, they weren't spectacular, but they were better. Payton was better individually the second half of the season. He was 60% or better in every game the second half of the season, with the exception of the Alabama game where he was under 40%, but he played plenty fine enough against Alabama to win that game. So when I look at the offense and I see a very clear vision for what the scheme is going to look like from start to finish, and I see less swapping quarterbacks, and I see the entire running back room back, and I see improvements on the offensive line, and I see a strong tight end room that's almost virtually unchanged, and I see a wide receiver core that we all know is dramatically improved. I see a lot of reasons why he individually will look better. And as a whole, because that is, again, where I think I'll end the answer how I started it. That's your conversation. Is the offense better in 2024 versus just is one player individually better? One player will look better if he improves, number one, and everybody else around him improves. And I expect both of those things to be in place in 2024.
That's fair. That's fair. And I think that is the way that you just framed that is a way that a lot of people don't look at it, because it is, I mean, that's the conversation that's brought up basically every time that the talent that's been brought in is talked about, is he's the one that people are, hanging on. But like you said, if the players around you aren't playing well, then there's not much you can do about that.
Swap Carson Beck and Payton Thorne. What kind of numbers does Payton put up last year with Georgia's offensive line and with Brock Bowers and with their running game? What kind of numbers does Carson Beck put up running, in and out with Robbie Ashford last year? And with a scheme that changes week to week or halfway through the year. It's not, we put way too much in. Quarterback is important. Like it's kind of a catch-22. It almost sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but the quarterback is the most important player offensively, but he is not by any stretch the only player on the field. Those other guys matter a ton.
This is from Dakota from Foley, asked if we think we can see Perry Thompson have as big of an impact as Cam Coleman is expected to, even though he did not enroll early.
It's a good question. I'm very high on Perry. Before I go back to Dakota's question, I want to kind of pose this hypothetical, which speaks to quarterbacks and their importance. If Cam Newton had stuck around for 2011, how many games does Auburn win in 2011 when they replaced almost their entire offensive line, entire defensive line? I mean, you have major change-outs on both lines of scrimmage, and Auburn in their losses, I think 5 losses in 11, they're blown out. They were not competitive in at least 3 of them. So how many of those do you win? How much is one quarterback? The best quarterback that's ever played in the SEC is Cam Newton. How much a difference does he make on the 2011 team?
You think offense, but then you also have to think defense, because if your defense can't give your offense a break, then
it all matters.
It does.
It all matters.
It does. It does.
So
we need to give Payton Thorne a break, I think.
All right, back to the Perry question. I don't know if immediately he makes the same impact. I think that he can be just as much of a problem for defensive coordinators and defensive personnel's the back half of the season, though. I think that's why you bring in a Robert Lewis and a KLS from Penn State, guys who have more experience and can fit right in maybe a little bit better. Cam Coleman, I expect to be the number 1 receiver on this team, but whether it's Lewis or KLS to be the 2, certainly the first half of the year is probably more my expectation. But man, with Perry's size, with his ability to just go get the ball and win 50-50 balls, last year at Foley, he was in an offense that was not throwing the ball around as much. They had a little bit of a shorter quarterback, a sophomore, first year in the system, and they ran the ball a lot more. So Perry's going to like that jump to get back into the thick of an offense where, the guys you're matching up against are a little bit tougher. The speed of the game is kind of, you're getting back in that track. And I expect it's probably natural especially because he wasn't here in the spring, for that to take a little time. But I think if he's on the field in November and Auburn's playing, Vandy, ULM, Texas A&M, and Alabama, when he's on the field in November, he's just as much a matchup problem as Cam Coleman when you get to that point in the season.
Do you think we'll have a 1,000-yard receiver?
It's a great question because we've only had 2 ever.
Yeah, 1999.
Yeah, and that 99 team wasn't it. I mean, they were a sub 500 team. Now, can you imagine what they would have been had Ben Leard not gotten injured in 99? They would have gone to a bowl. It would have been a terrific year for Tommy Tuberville and his staff. I don't think so, because I think they'll spread it around to different receivers, and I think Cam Coleman will draw double teams almost instantly. And so I'll say no, but I think it's possible that Auburn has 3 receivers with 500 yards or more, which is something we haven't seen much. We've seen it a handful of times, but not much.
I think fans would be happy with that.
Yeah, if Cam has 800 and I don't know, Robert Lewis has 600 and somebody else has 500 plus.
Well, and
it's almost 2,000 from those 3.
And because when you look at it, it's a nice stat to promote, but at the same time, it's good to have options. It's good to have options. And if you're comfortable enough with, enough receivers to have 3 with 500 plus yards, then that's great.
Yeah. And it's all about scheme and matchups too, because you're going to run the ball still. And so if, again, defensively, schematically, if they're never going to double cover Cam Coleman, that's how Ronnie Daniels got to 1,000 yards in 99. Is LSU refused to double cover him. They refused to play zone. They played man against him all game, and Ben Lear just threw it up to him, and he caught it. Same against Georgia that year. 2 games, 2 monster games got him essentially to that 1,000-yard mark, and teams never made any adjustments defensively. So if teams never adjust to Cam and they just play one-on-one man defense all game, he'll have some ridiculous stats, just some stupid numbers. But guys, they're not going to do that defensively. They're going to make adjustments, which will mean that Rivaldo Fairweather will have some one-on-ones that he can win. And the running lanes will be a little bit bigger for Jarquez Hunter and Damari Alston and Jeremiah Cobb and other guys like Robert Lewis and Keandre Lambert-Smith and Camden Brown and Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons. And all of these guys are going to have opportunities in space when teams start to double Cam Coleman or Rivaldo or stack the box to stop the running game. To your point, there are multiple guys who are going to have opportunities, and it's a deeper position, deeper and more talented overall than it's been in a while for Auburn.
But that will do it for episode 2 of the Auburn football season preview. Again, we are only 60 days away. This is our last month without college football, which I'm very excited about. You can follow Brad on Twitter at AUBradlaw and tell them about where you can find Village Vice with you and Zach.
Yeah, Village Vice AU. You can find it on the War Damn Pods channel. We just went over 3,000 subscribers, closing in on 140 shows since we launched a little less than a year ago, and ramping up for football season. Zach and I are doing about 3 shows a week on average, and that'll go up to 4 once the season starts. And love you to come by and like and subscribe and comment on the shows and have fun with us throughout the year.
Awesome. Well, be sure to follow Brad on all social media platforms. Check out Village Vice. They are all year round. There's no off season on Village Vice. And thanks for tuning in, guys. I will see you all next time. And War Eagle.